My full name is Jean Ibrahim Mikhail Zarou. And الحمولي دار عواد.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Ramallah. I spent most of my life in Ramallah. I traveled to a lot, but I lived here and married also a Ramallah man from the Zarou family. That's why my last name is Zarou.
And when were you born?
I was born 1940 in May, 14th of May. So you could tell that the Nakba affected me a lot.
Please state your mother and father's full names.
My father's name is Ibrahim Musa Mikhail, and my mother's full name is Azize Khalil Mikhail. They were cousins in Ramallah long ago. There wasn't, you marry cousins because all of them are related.
Please state your grandparents' full names on both sides.
On both sides, both of my grandparents are from the Mikhail family, and one is called Musa, and the other one is called Khalil.
And on your mom's side?
My mom's side, Khalil. My father's side, Musa, but they're also Mikhail.
What did your parents do for a living?
My mother worked at home, but that's work. This is why sometimes people think when a woman doesn't go to work outside the house that she's not working. And they lived with large families, and she takes care of the others as well. So she has been working, I would say, even not full-time, overtime. But unfortunately, people do not recognize any job that is not paid, that it is work. And this is not right, because it deprives people who want to volunteer from helping. And so I was a volunteer most of my life, but I taught also and developed a program of ethics. And that's why I wanted to speak about, I was asked to speak, but I spoke in gatherings and meetings about the empowerment of women. Okay, if they decide to stay home and take care of the children, I feel it's a sacred work, sacred to really take care of the new generations that are essential for our well-being as a society. But they should really understand what it takes, so they're not idle doing nothing.
And what did your father do for a living?
My father had a coffee house, and he was, I would say, a revolutionary man. He worked against the British mandate to get especially with what was going before the Nakba. And he was also very involved in not only being revolutionary, being a person of values. So when things went wrong, my father was the spokesperson to make the fighters or the revolutionaries, if they did something wrong, to alienate the community from joining. They'll try to correct that, because it's not enough to resist. It's also to get more people participating by respecting what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's not for personal interest or so on. It's for building the community.
And do you have any personal memories of your grandparents?
I have memory of, I never knew my father's father. I have memory of only the father of my mother. He used to come to visit his daughter, and he would like to sit under the fig trees and so on and rest and have a nap because he walked and it's hot. So I was the one who talked to him and brought for him something to lay down on. People long ago loved in the fields to have something like a cushion, a long one, or so on, and just lean on it and have a rest from the long walk. He really, the memory of my grandfather was he emphasized education so much, Khalil Makhail. And he sent all his sons to university. One of his sons is Dahoud Mikhail. I don't know if you know him. He is the father of Hanan Ashrawi, who was a medical doctor. Another one became also a doctor from AUB, and he was a specialist for bones, orthopedic as a specialist, also with the surgery of the hand. And one went to the university and something happened in Beirut, but he died young. So, you know, all his daughters and his sons, he was very keen on education. And he gave them the full liberty to choose the schools, even private schools they wanted. So that is my memory. His wife died young, he remarried, and he was very anxious to see that they do have the right. So my mother, who is not around, she passed away at the age of 96, has studied at the French schools. At the beginning, the only concern for my grandfather was he loved her so much that she should continue to wear the Palestinian dress, the long one with the embroidery and so on. And she went to school and she found she's the only one. So, you know, after 2 weeks, she said, Father, is it okay to change to a dress? Like he wanted to protect her. And then he was convinced.
Tell us one of your most memorable stories you heard from your grandparents.
I didn't have too much to talk. As I said, I don't know, all of them were dead when I was born, with the exception of this grandmothers and grandfathers. But I know of them, of the stories of my father. The grandfather on the father's side, he lost the first wife and then the second wife and the third wife, so, you know, and then he died. But he was a very wise man. So when the brothers had an argument or so on, he was the one they referred, 5 brothers, their problems, and he was a just man, and he will, so this is what I heard too.
What traditions did you practice while growing up, and do you still practice the same traditions?
You know, traditions are good, but nothing, culture is not static, that it doesn't change. No, it changes to meet the needs of the people with education, with the growth of cities, with marriage, with mixing with other people, and so on. So we cannot say that things 90 years ago were the same like now. But we know about them. And I think something we preserve to a lesser degree, hospitality of the Arab culture. This is very, very important. I am asked to address many international groups, and they are really very touched about the hospitality of the Palestinians. And this is a value that we stuck to at different levels. And generosity is not only in giving food, but generosity of spirit. You give of your time, of your energy, of your to help others when they're in need or when they're asking for something. So it has a wider meaning than just feeding. But the hospitality in itself is a ministry of the culture, because around food, you share the intimacy of your place, of your house, of your time, of your efforts. And that is important. They don't have that in many other cultures. And you learn more in this setting.
Describe your home in Ramallah. How many bedrooms, bathrooms, did it have modern amenities? Did you share a room? If so, with whom?
When I was a child, our house was 3 rooms, and we were 4 sisters and 1 brother. So we had to share. And it was smaller, and I think sometimes we want to imitate some Western ways of having more space and more privacy. In fact, the word privacy does not exist in the Arabic dictionary. خصوصية. And, what does that mean? So in a way, there is a stronger sense of community. But if you see now with the movement of technology, there are good things that you have your room and your TV and your bathroom and so on. I'm speaking about the States, and some who have money do the same here. But what happens, and then the kids are on their either email or computer or cell phone. Everybody is doing that. So the sense of community is not as strong, the sense of communication with their brothers and sisters and their family as well as it is. They communicate with their friends, but they miss the art of, accommodation of others and sitting with them and learning about them and offering them coffee and learning from the older generation. So this is good technologically, but sometimes if we don't try to evaluate and stay in the middle, yes, it's good for this, but not to go too far. And in social change and any change, our problems are that people never stay in the middle. It's, the pendulum of the piano that keeps ticking this way and that way, from right to left, from left to right. And that is not helpful, because we're going from one extreme to the other. And I am not against change, but we do not change for the sake of change. We want to change for the better. And that's what change is supposed to be.
What part of Ramallah did you live in?
Until I got married, I lived in a house which is adjacent to what now you call the Ramallah Hospital. All the Mikhails owned property there. And I lived in that, and I used to walk to the French school, and this is where I studied. And maybe you want to know more instead about the house, about the involvement of the family, or I don't know what you like to hear.
Okay, go ahead.
For instance, my mother was very anxious also, like her father wanted to educate her. She wanted her kids to be educated. So she was very keen on doing that, and she was open all the time to learn. Although my mother is a Christian, she read the Quran. She was open to other faiths, a pluralistic society, and we learned that, all of us, from her. I have been part of interfaith dialogue with all other faiths on the international level. And I know, in fact, my mother wasn't satisfied with one issue of the Quran. She wanted others that were printed either, some in Pakistan, some in Saudi Arabia, and one was with English and Arabic. That was published by a professor from Harvard. He's Muslim too, but called Siddiqui, Dr. Siddiqui. So she was really very open. And if she's living now, she will be over 100. And so we learned that. I have Al-Fatiha in my home that was given to me as a gift when I addressed the issues in a college in the United States. And it was an old copy from Turkey, a old art copy with Al-Fatiha. So we have been always living in a pluralistic society. We felt we are part of our society. We never felt differences and talked about them. No, we have so much to enrich one another. And our issue was how to live a life with better values that we learn from all religious traditions, whether Muslim or Christian, and how to try to transform the cultures that were violating, not cultures, the structures that were violating the dignity of people, whether empowering women or young people or, education or so on. So that was important, and I participated in the full life of our community, and I ended up, after marriage, educating myself, my children. I was the first woman to be the head of a church in Palestine, and worked in this position. It's a volunteer position. You don't take any money, but it's volunteer in the sense you're not paid, but you have to be not voted for, agreed on by the whole Quaker or Friends community, which runs the schools in Ramallah. So that's what, I really stepped down this year because I'm tired. And I wanted also to prepare for the future. But I'm still involved, very involved in, I have groups coming all the time, not delegations that are tourists or want to know about their town. And they are really interested in our values, in our working to end occupation. And I have been doing that most of my life. And the delegations that come are, from the World Council of Churches or other churches that are working on our issues, like divestment, and the Quakers are working on that, or education, advocacy, and really speaking about the equality and about apartheid existing here. So I have been very instrumental speaker for the World Council of Churches as a member of the steering committee. You can speak up in the meetings if you're a member of the board, but it's on a larger level. It represents most of the Christians in the world. So my approach opened me to outreach all the other churches. And now, many in the States, you find the government is so much against us, or other governments. But civil society and the churches, not the right-wing churches, the regular churches, are all standing with Palestine. And they have taken statements, very strong statements. As an example, the churches invited me to go to Norway. Every time I spoke, there was a big gathering that will end up in a demonstration in support of us and Gaza because of the return, walks. And so this is even through religion, through the women's organizations. I was also on the local level president of the YWCA of Jerusalem. Then I became the president of Ramallah for a time. Then I stepped down. I want young people. It's called Young Women Christian Association. So I stepped down. I never stay, forever. But also I was elected and even nominated from the first time I attended the Council of the World YWCA as the vice president of the world. They wanted me president, but I couldn't because we didn't have a state yet. And it's 4 countries, But now we are members. I pushed for it, and Palestine National Organization of the YWCA is a member of the World YWCA, which is nice. We've moved into, and we were recognized as a branch of these branches in 91. So it's even before other things happened with the UN and international law and so on, that the authority is trying to get to, at this point. There has been a role also in education. I taught ethics for the French schools. I developed a program that unites all of us. Besides the religious education, we're not, but through the religious programs, I built community. I try from the little ones until they graduate, you know how kids don't know you're Christian, you're Muslim, and they try to argue. And I say, why are you arguing? Islam respects Jesus and Mary, Maryam. So what are you disagreeing? And we're one people. We share the land, the language, the culture. It's the same. Oh, yes, yes. Even one day I was teaching about Eid al-Adha because it has a religious background, and Abraham is common to all of us, the Abrahamic faith. So, I mean, this is grade 4, imagine, very young ones. And they started fighting and saying, no, you don't, you call it Isaac, Ishaq, the one that Abraham wanted to offer to God. And the Muslims said, no, it's Ismail, the one that God wanted. Then I gave them a minute, and I said, wait a minute, tell me, does your father respect you and your brother the same way and love you the same way? Of course, we're his sons. So I said, okay, he had 2 sons. It doesn't matter the name, it's the idea. So this united them rather than arguing. This is wrong, this is right. There's nothing wrong or right. It's the value of offering, the most you have to God if you believe in these things. And, then they were very, really, these young children absorbed it. And now when they meet me, they are young and they have graduated and work. Oh, miss, we learned so much. Even when I taught home economics, it wasn't about just teaching them how to cook. Of course, there is a change in buildings and in things, but through the years, how did we change as people? It is not what we own in houses and rooms and bathrooms and cinemas and so on. We need that, and that development is good. But also, who have we become? And what I developed in me as a person. So it's not really bragging, don't misunderstand. It's a way of sharing. No education is helpful unless it is for participation in the life of the community and for liberation. So I got involved in education, in teaching ethics, in teaching home economics, through that, trying to liberate and unite the community, liberate women. And until now, they really, when they see me at the butcher or in the street, they stop and embrace me. Miss, we enjoyed those classes, and they really, so this is important. I give you another example. I had one brother who was also very, very intelligent. He had London Metric before he was 16, was accepted to one of the best universities in the States, graduated as a chemical engineer after 4 years. And in the summer, he wanted to go and do some work to raise some money. And he found out that he is working in labs. No, he wants to work with people. So immediately he found that's not the job. He was very bright in sciences and so on. And he had a scholarship because he was very, And he went to Harvard after that, after finishing, a degree, where he's an only son, and my parents needed that support after giving him so much. No, it's okay, I really need to. And what topic did he choose in Harvard? Political science and Islam. Because he wants to help his community, he has to learn about both. And after he got his PhD, the title, he really took a specific theologian in Islam, Al-Mawardi, to speak about inspiration and justice in Islam. And now, even in the dialogue I told you, when they know about the book of my brother and what he did, they keep asking me for a copy and have reverence for the way he emphasized the very positive things in the Islamic. And at Harvard, they were not happy. They wanted him to choose another theologian. But he wanted, because this will be official records. And after 67, although he was a professor with Edward Said in Harvard, also they were together when in Princeton, but he wanted to come and help his people. So he asked my sister to mail all his books after his PhD to Birzeit University as a donation, all his things. He didn't even worry about taking his diploma. Many years later, his friend sent it to my mother. He joined the PLO in 68, and in 76, he was among the disappeared in Lebanon because of the civil war. He didn't accept to take money. This is, there was a program in Birzeit about him to teach the new generation. He didn't accept 15 dinars like the fighters, PhD from Harvard. He was working, trying to create equality between male and female, young and old, and also those that work in the field and those that are on the higher level. He never accepted to say that he had a degree from Harvard or so on. Just a simple man, we want to serve there. And until now, when I meet people, one of his lessons was, you are with what you offer your people. Not your family, not your tribe, not your money, not your education. And so it's after he died that knew he had a PhD from Harvard and he's from Ramallah, or he is Christian or Muslim. That is not important. What's important is your values and how you serve. So it was very effective. In fact, I went to Lebanon with a team of researchers because they wanted to write a book about the Palestinian struggle, refugees in Lebanon. And when I said I am his sister, the woman in charge of the women's union, she said, if it wasn't for him, my mother wouldn't have allowed me to work and become the head of the women's organization. So he helped in that way. My husband was a pharmacist. He's dead, died 31 years ago, was a pharmacist. And he had a degree from the AUB and from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. After the war of 67, we found out that they were trying to, they couldn't send an American principal to the French schools because of the war. They were afraid or so on. I kept telling my husband, we cannot let down our people after a war. They can't send somebody. We're part of this society. We have to do something. And they asked him if he accepted to run the schools. It was more trouble. In fact, they suspected us. Why would such an educated man with a profession he can make money would accept to take this position? But partly because we didn't want the schools to be closed. There so much changed because of the occupation. But we worked very hard, both of us, to raise an endowment to guarantee the growth of the schools. We served there 18 years. And then, my husband died a few months afterwards. He was really tired with all these years. I served with him, but I have an outreach with liberation theology to liberate our faith from the values, the way people explain them that are not helpful to our liberation. I got involved also to speak about the nonviolent resistance. Yes, we have to resist. Not all people resist, so do they stay and do nothing, about the situation? We can resist in nonviolent way, in keeping our narrative, our culture, our language, our serving, helping with the different needs. My brother-in-law was mayor of town, so my children had the two uncles on both sides, my brother and my husband's brother, and they were the only uncles for them. My brother, until now, we don't know what happened to him. If he is among the disappeared. And the uncle, what we think, he was, maybe he died or something. My brother-in-law was deported by not Sharon, the first one, anyway, by the Israelis. And after 14 years, they allowed him to come, but it was a long journey. His mother died and he couldn't, and the Federation knows him and know his influence on the town. So they know what he offered to Ramallah. So this is just in short. My son is an architect. He worked here, he built many buildings, but at the same time he went to the States after the second Intifada because his kids' schools were out and in and so on, and some of them were frightened through the shooting, and so he went to the States, but later he left architecture. There was a problem, in the States, things fell down. And now he's the director of the United Palestinian Appeal to help Palestinians, النداء الفلسطيني الموحد, to help Palestinians in Jordan, in Palestine, in Gaza, and in Lebanon. So he's involved. My other son was working here. He was moved to the States to this big company called DAI that was working in Ramallah. But they're trying to help with projects countries that need projects. So he is also in that position. And my daughter taught at the French schools English for 26 years because that was an important subject for her. She studied at Birzeit. She didn't accept to go to the States to be educated. Do you want to ask other questions? Because it's important to know. Now I am 78, and I have groups that come and want me to speak to them. I'm not a young person anymore. Is a story of the Palestinian people and of Ramallah, is a story of human hurt and human hope. Hurt because we were dispossessed of our land, of our resources, with the Nakba, I was 8 years with the Nakba. When it was the 67 war, my oldest son was 8. He was affected by it, my daughter was, and then it's the transferring of violence and structures of violating our dignity and who we are as people. Not only violating us by taking the land, which causes economic structures of violence, political structures of violence that deny us most of our human rights. And I joke, did you specialize? They asked me, they called me to speak at Al-Haq for a group. I said, you don't have to be an expert to know that your human rights are violated. You know that. So we are not only dispossessed of the land and of our freedom, we're dispossessed of our narrative. They explain the history and the narrative in a different way. What they call their Independence Day during the Nakba, or their dream, it was our catastrophe, our Nakba. What they call 67, their, liberating their land, it is not true. It's occupying other people. What they call Judea and Samaria and Israel have been Palestine. So we have been dispossessed of our culture also, of our language, of our narrative, of our land. And that's why we are keen to work in different ways, as you're doing now, by trying to have these videos, to empower people to see the sign of hope, so we do not lose sight of what's going on. And we have to keep hope going. And hope is not something somewhere in the clouds. If you hope for liberation, you have to work for it. If you hope for peace, you have to work for it. It's not just something, And we are what we are trying to do. This is who we are as people. So there is the hope in transforming these cultures, and there is also the hurt that we share. But we do not allow the hurt to possess us in a way that we are frozen and then we cannot serve our communities. In any field, in music, in video, in technology, in education, in cultural activities, in writing books. I wrote a book and many articles. about women, about nonviolent resistance for women and others, about our values and ethical ways, and the sulha in the Arab, just to bring the image out, the real image. We are people. And look what and I went to a conference in Harvard to speak. I wear always Palestinian things when I speak. Not, this is small, but always it's a Palestinian jacket or Palestinian dress and so on. There was a German woman wearing a Palestinian embroidered dress. And I looked at her and said, where did you get your dress? From Israel. I was really torn apart. I said, you're mistaken. This is Palestinian embroidery, and our women that enjoy it, but it's nice to know the source. Very, in a kind way. They call the Hebrew class, that it's their class. The knafi, the hummus, they're selling it in the States with the name of sabra. So, and we're raising consciousness to the people of these things so they know our history. We were here, and this is our culture. They want to share it, fine, but they should know the source and not say, knafi now is a battle over knafi. Over the hatta, they had a program on the dresses they made from different colors of hatta. And they call that, Israeli designer and Israeli dresses. So we have to do all we can to empower people. First, to know about themselves if they don't know, and also empower them by knowing, discovering their different gifts to share them with the community. I would say freedom involves responsibility. If we want to be free, we have to be very responsible and not to leave it for others to do our work.
Did you live in that house the whole time you lived in Ramallah? If not, where did you live?
In my parents' house, we were in a house with the whole family, the aunts and the uncles that were not married, and the grandma and her, not my grandma, stepmother, but the third wife. And then we moved to another house, and I lived in it they were both next to the hospital until I got married. Then I moved to live on what we call Radio, they call it Radio Street, or the house close to Al Hamra Hotel. And then later, after many years, we sold it. And now they have a big building there for it. After that house, we moved to the campus of the French school in Biri. And part of it is in Biri, part of it is in Ramallah. And we lived there for 18 years. Then my son built us a house on the only piece of property we had. That was also Michael property, Mikhail. And we built our house there, and I have been living there. Go ahead.
As a child growing up in Ramallah, what did you do for fun?
This is a nice question. My son was asking me this. I went after Norway, to the States to see both my sons and their families. And My oldest son knew that I've worked very hard, and I was tired and sick. So he said, "Mother, what did you do for fun? So we'll do something for you." And I looked at him and laughed. Fun? What is fun? It not, I mean, I enjoyed all what I did, but I didn't call it fun. It was really, I had a purpose in doing what but I enjoyed all the writers that I met in life, and they shared their books with me. I enjoyed the gatherings because it was a way of advocacy with the World Council and other institutions. At a young age, 26, I was the head of the Quakers in the Middle East, which is unusual for a woman in that position and that age, you know. So it's, again, a volunteer job, but it means that the communities trusted me, but I always looked older than I am.
Were you able to travel easily from village to village back then?
Yes, it was much easier than it is now. I think the closure that the Israelis have made, it's not to isolate us from going to Jerusalem and Israel. It is also to isolate the Palestinians from one another, because our power was more in gathering together. In fact, I used to open the YWCA of Jerusalem. It had a big hall, and invite all the women's organizations to meet once a month there. So we organize between ourselves what we do, then repeating the same thing, and discuss it and see what's more important. During the Intifada, the first Intifada, you try to collect blankets for the prisoners, you visit the wounded, you bring food to the families, you do that, and so on. And it was wonderful because there was power in the community work. But with this fragmentation and the checkpoints and the time it takes, the roads are for settlers only, certain roads. So what happens? We have to take the long road and the crooked road. And at times we couldn't, even the same car could not continue when we went to the bridge. I had to ride on a donkey once from one place to the other because it was long and downhill to get to the other car, to go to the bridge, because I was traveling to Philadelphia to give a keynote address. So it has been difficult. I wouldn't say it was all, but the fulfillment when you see that this action has brought some awareness, understanding of the problems of the Palestinians. Also, it really, so this is how it changes the image of who we are, because the media internationally listened to what the Israeli side said, and we're terrorists all the time, this is for them, you know. And also the Israelis, I met in many meetings where the Israelis would not like to say your identity is Palestinian. Because when they started, they said, a land without a people, for a people without a land. So the minute I say in international conferences, I am Palestinian, they really, I could tell in body language. Also, they cannot see, and this is because I lived here. I know the situation all my life. I am Palestinian. So they don't like us to expose the reality of the people and see that we can talk, we're people, like everybody. And once they try to focus that we're terrorists, I said, even if you believe them that we are terrorists, are we making weapons and selling them to the world? Are we hardly militarized like Israel? Are we like the states that helps Israel? Terrorizing whom? We're terrorized. I explain about, and I developed a system of talking about all these structures of violence, the political, the economic, the cultural, you know that, the social, and also the religion, how they use it against us by interpreting, you know, some of Christian or Jewish things to, this is their they are the chosen people in this land. So I had to study a lot about that and work. I was one of the founding members of Sabil in Jerusalem. I was also the vice president to liberate our theology from these ideas. They're the chosen people, they have, this is their land, and so on. And I even questioned all that by saying, God does not differentiate between anybody. We are all created by God, so I can't take that. So I wrote many articles about this, and they're taught in different theology books. And so you can find any field to work in if you're concerned. Your gifts might take you here or there. In advocacy, in promoting justice, in boycott, in I don't want to speak. Even the environment is another issue.
What is one of your most vivid memories of Ramallah growing up here?
My vivid memories of the victories, the olive trees, the fruit trees that surrounded our homes, the pine trees where we even got the snowbird and we collected it. All these things were around. We used to have walks and hikes to the valley of Ain Kenya, and also all Ramallah people owned property there, where we had many, many figs, and I enjoyed figs. They kept telling me that I am the mother of figs. متين وينك متين. So I loved figs, so we made. Also, we enjoyed the flowers and the greenery that we had around our houses. We didn't have florists, but we had our flowers around every house. We had vegetables that we had, and we tried to. So these were lovely memories for me. The walks to pick the red anemones and the flowers from the fields. That was, for me, a very, I love flowers, so it's very uplifting. These were good memories. Also, the visits around different holidays. All of us go. We were very open, very ecumenical as a Ramallah society. For instance, before, the Catholics will celebrate their, Christmas and the Easter at different times than the Orthodox. But as neighbors, we didn't mind. We will go, all of us, to the Catholics, and then we'll go again to the Orthodox. We were one. At the same time, we go to Sitna Maryam, where it became also something that the Muslims celebrated. Uh, Everything. We're a community, one community, we do all. That was really also as a student at the school. But I had some good memories and some frightening, frightful memories with many losses in our country and wars and so.
When the Arab-Israeli conflict began, what were some of the immediate changes you experienced living in Ramallah?
First of all, they tried to control the community. They like to build in us the sense of fear, and they are in charge. They didn't know much about us, and sometimes they were very, they wondered, and they didn't like it because they treated us less than equal. And sometimes I challenged those issues. I challenged that kind of thinking with them. And they thought I'm too radical.
How long did you live in Ramallah during the conflict?
All of the time. I didn't live outside the 48, nor the 67, nor now, you know. If I go abroad, it's for a month or 2 weeks or 3 weeks for a purpose, for a meeting of the World Council of Churches of 2 weeks, for a meeting of World Conference on Religion and Peace, for meetings of the worldwide WCA. I was a member of these 3 organizations, voted for by the organization itself.
What did you and your family do to survive?
Survive economically, or our bodies not to die, or, you know, in 67, we ran from our house. We lived on Radio Street, that is now going through to the Muqata, opposite the Bir Zayt, you know, place. And we worried about our children. One was 5 and one was 8. So we ran to the building facing us for protection. And then we got a bomb there. And it was nearly, my husband was about to be killed because he wanted all the others to be inside and he was closer to the door. And a bomb fell in 67 on the door of that shelter in with our neighbors. Then we had to run away from there to the Ruka building, which is opposite our house. They had a first-story house, you know, empty. And we went there and stayed for a few days. It was difficult. Electricity was cut off, so all their fridges weren't working. And they had many apartments and so much food, and just for a week, you know, because it will go rotten. And the older were cooking for the whole community that was hiding there. But also it was really, then they started looking for my brother-in-law, who was mayor, to come and be in charge of the electricity and to bring it back to the city. But every time they came to take him, we were very worried that they might not bring him back because they were detaining people right and left. And they did it later. Anyway, so this difficult for surviving physically. And then we did not have bread until the whole thing opened. And this is one thing that we got a yearning for as Arabs, daily bread. So that wasn't easy in those times. Also, I witnessed many refugees in 48. The Quaker Meeting House, which is the church, housed 6 families, one room, for 6 months, and they were ready to worship in another place. The schools had many refugees. My house, a small house, also gave refuge to a family from Lidda, not for rent or anything. They were related to my grandmother, and we gave them. And many of them camped under our pine trees. And now Qaddura camp has been the property of the family, the uncle of my husband. But it became a political issue that they could not get them out because they're refugees. So this family lost most of their land for that reason.
When and where did you meet your husband, and did you know him in Ramallah?
Yes, of course. My husband is a Zarou, but he's from the same Awad clan. In fact, he's related also to my mother, and he was my teacher of chemistry in the French school. I really wanted to go to the States, but I found that it was so expensive for my parents. They educated my oldest sister and brother. And so when he asked for my hand, in fact, most of my classmates were very crazy about him. So when I said he came to propose, all of them kept saying, Jean, what can you? So they were really encouraging me. Even if you go to college and so on, you can't get a better man. So thanks be to God, this happened. But I lost him after 31 years. He died. But he was really very committed also to what I am doing. And he was encouraging me, and not only encouraging me, he would say, not in front of me, that he's proud of what I'm doing.
How and when did you get married?
I got married in Ramallah in 1956.
What is your occupation? What is your husband's occupation?
My husband was a teacher and educator and also a pharmacist, and also he specialized in the pharmaceutical industries, how to produce, these things. But he didn't work in it, and he devoted more time in education. He taught chemistry, and then later he was director of the school for 18 years.
And how many children do you have?
I gave birth to 4 children, but the first girl died very young. She was very young, 54 days after she was born. And then I had my son Salim, and my daughter Soha, and my son Walid. 2 sons, 1 daughter.
You didn't immigrate to the US, صح?
No, I am here, and my daughter is here. And my daughter refused even to. She went once to the US. She doesn't want to visit even. And she's still here. She's married, and she has a son and a daughter, and she has 3 grandchildren. So I am not only a grandmother, I am a great-grandmother.
Do you still, no. What are your thoughts about Ramallah now and what's happening with Jerusalem?
I really like Ramallah because it's my city. I identify with it. I love Jerusalem. It's part of my culture, my activities. The 3 organizations where I worked for were in Jerusalem. Every day I'll travel to the YW or to Sabil or to speak to groups there. So Jerusalem was the place of worship, the place of... It was very important. You can see now many paintings in my home about Jerusalem. You see many sculptures too. It's very, very important to me. It connected the whole West Bank and other areas of Palestine. So Jerusalem was a place of connection, a place of worship, work for Palestinians around Jerusalem. But the closure of Jerusalem long ago, before, in the early 90s, have affected workers, have affected when they stopped allowing us, West Bank people, to go to Jerusalem. And now it's worse when the Americans announced that they moved the embassy there. Many people think moving the embassy is not a big deal. It is a big deal. Israelis are in charge, and it means they have more control over the livelihood of people living in Jerusalem, besides us who want to visit Jerusalem and work there and be part of it. Ramallah is serving now with some institutions like alternative, but we never change our minds as Palestinians. Jerusalem should be our capital. Is this what you have in mind about? And I love both cities. They're part of Palestine, as I love others.
Do you think you will see peace in your lifetime?
It's really a difficult question to ask, because peace has been misunderstood by people. Many people thought peace is submission. Many people thought peace is accepting the peace of the powerful. For me, peace is when we're having enough to eat. Peace is when our human rights are protected. And I had this in a book, and in many countries they framed it and made it into, when we have social justice, it's all these things. When we are treated as equal, when we are free, when we don't have sickness and diseases. So even if there isn't a war, happening now, we're not having peace, even if they're negotiating. Because meanwhile, while they call it a peace process, it's not. It's a political process that the powerful is dictating to the powerless what they can do. At the same time, even not complying with what they are dictating to us. But I hope and work that we really get our rights.
What are you doing to help the peace process?
By trying to share the real history, our presence as people, our narrative, our needs, and also that we are occupied people. It is not that we are outsiders. We are part of this land. We are Palestinians. You have to keep, and then we affirm that in our actions, in our schools, in our, that show who we are. And we've succeeded because many people come here and they really don't believe that Palestinians are educated. Palestinians are, have these centers of culture. So they, and Ramallah has been able to share this image also, and some cultural institutes in Jerusalem and so on, and filmmakers. And
What are you doing in support of the Palestinians?
as a teacher, sharing also as training some of the young people how to address other groups, how to speak to them. It's important. You have to find a way to speak to groups. Sometimes we're not too angry. We're too angry, and then they dismiss our analysis. Of course we are angry. So I would say I rage against injustice, but I refuse to destroy myself as a human being trying to present a story, and destroy my people by giving, I am a representative of Palestinians, not that I am officially, but I feel I am one of the people, and we have to present our people in the best. Of course, through writing, many people are studying my books in seminaries, in colleges, and these groups come and have talks with me. So I'm raising consciousness also to our problems. And I am free to do that freer, because I am not speaking for any political party. I never joined, and they're doing good work, but I am linked to the institution, to a religious institution, so I'd like to share the values also that I believe in. And this makes you more free. We have enough captivities in Palestine.